Okay, we are recording. Cool. I posted the agenda in the chat, but also obviously in Slack. Just for your information, Annie, I may have not kind of made this completely clear at the beginning or during our onboarding sessions, but for the weekly team kind of get-togethers, what process we've kind of put in place is to paste important changes that you come across into this table. They don't have to be every important change that you find, but significant ones that you'd like to bring up for discussion.
In the agenda?
Yeah, in the agenda, exactly.
Okay, cool.
So actually looks like a light week in terms of important changes to discuss, which is unusual. Usually we have a handful, and that takes up generally the lion's share of our time, and then we kind of go through the discussion and agenda items that are
Okay.
below.
Yeah.
So we can just start there. So Justin, I see you posted a change. You want to take the floor?
Will do. So, Safe Drinking Water Hotline page used to have a phone number that you could call for information about safe drinking water, and now it's just an email form. So,
and they removed hotline, right?
Yeah, there's no more hotline. Now a electron line or something. And it hasn't been really that many changes to this. So I don't know if this is consistent with anything else people have seen, sort of reduced access, but I'll keep an eye on it. But I wanted to bring it to people's attention in case there was other things like this that people may have seen along the EPA website.
I've seen something similar to the DOE's website. It's ringing a very distant bell. This is a while ago, but they definitely kind of made some department less accessible. Whether it was like removing their actual physical addresses or something like that, but it's a different agency. So seen a couple things along this line.
Okay.
Probably be good, Justin, to stick this in the water notes doc that we're assembling.
Yep.
Which I can get.
Yeah,
the
if you
link
could.
Yeah,
if
I'll
you
send
send
you the
that,
link.
put that in the chat. That'd be great, or Slack.
Yeah, I'll probably do it in Slack. Right. Okay.
Cool.
Great.
I think the recorded information is 24/7, but the talk to a person, maybe bilingual service include recorded messages 24/7. So, but
It's just a bad sentence.
Yeah.
They can,
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
So that's all.
Cool. Thanks, Justin.
Yep.
So since I mean, maybe this is just a good moment to maybe just check in. I mean, a lot of folks couldn't join tonight. Justin, I did want to ask if you had synced up with Gretchen around what she was covering while you were away.
Yeah, she did some of them, and then I just took over where she got to. So I'm going to follow up with her when she's back in town, because she had some questions about it. But but yeah, I'll circle back up with her when she's back.
Okay, cool. So I just want to make sure, we have Annie and Brian getting ramped up. We've assigned a couple kind of practice domains. I don't think the two that Annie's working with are that exciting. They're kind of low priority.
That's very true.
Yeah, so we can think about as a team where people have excess capacity or have some domains that they could maybe pass on. So I think Justin D is certainly stretched as he's just started a new job also recently. So I'm just kind of looking at the align the allocation sheet, and it does seem that there are some gaps to fill. I know Aaron is also has made it clear that he wants to step away from monitoring work and focus more on some of the research and research or other items that we're doing. So, Annie, I might actually get you first looking at what Aaron was covering, and then maybe we'll look at other domains.
Okay, that sounds nice.
Does anybody else have anything to mention?
Yeah, somebody posted in the news this week. I don't know if Justin Shell saw this, but there was, I guess I can share my screen real quick. That'd probably be easiest. Do this. So this is the Endangered Species Act being stripped of key provisions. And so the proposal announced jointly by Interior and Commerce, right, would end the practice of extending similar protections to species regardless of whether they are listed as endangered or threatened. So if the proposal is approved, protections for threatened plants and animals will be made on a case-by-case basis. And there's a link to the endangered species site, Justin. And I just haven't taken a look at what's all spelled out there, but might be worth looking at it.
I think actually I might
Oh, is that
cover
yours?
this page. Yeah,
Oh,
I cover. I have
Okay.
FWS.
Oh,
and,
that's right. I forgot.
No, I've seen changes very much around ESA as well. Nothing recently, but like I want to say late last year, there's quite a lot of activity. So that's really
Yeah,
good to know,
okay.
and I'll keep it in mind.
Okay.
If you actually could send me that link. Did you
Yeah,
post it?
I'll just do it right now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank
Great.
you.
Sure.
Awesome. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I'm kind of glad totally you joined, because on the domain allocation sheet there are a number of domains that we had added to start kind of building a database and see if there are interesting changes for us to get monitoring. I've kind of poked around in some of the ones that we've recently added, but was there a more formal process for kind of bringing those into our week to week?
So you mean like if we actually want to do research on a particular domain and set up like monitoring on those pages and feel like we have that covered?
No, I just mean, well, yeah, pretty much. Like, we have a bunch that are more data needed if you've looked at the domain allocation sheet, and they've been that way pretty much since I can remember. Do you think, is that just kind of waiting for versionista to pick up enough actual material, i.e. if those pages are changing enough to warrant our attention?
Yeah, sorry, I missed it. It's not really about versionista picking up data. It's more about like feedback from analysts saying, like, whatever the word data there is vague, but it means like we think that there's significant changes happening on that domain. So more data needed means like no one's really looked at this, and let's like after someone looks at it, we can make an assessment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I'm thinking that, well, I've been poking around, but I haven't done a deep dive into a handful of them, especially ones that say more data needed. So I'm thinking that maybe we should as a team take a look through those.
One thing that we've been doing at Sunlight a little bit, although not really systematically, is that we've introduced like another time scale for monitoring. So we have the weekly, we have the like domains that no one's looking at, but then we also have a monthly now, which, I mean, the script is the same. It's just like runs on a monthly basis instead of a weekly basis. And then certain domains that we're like, we do want to keep tabs on this, but it's not that, we don't have reason to believe it's like imminent. Then we just look at it on a monthly cycle. I think that's happened once for a few domains, but so we're still working out like continuity there, but it shouldn't be a tricky thing to do at all. So that could definitely be an option on the table. I think the big like lesson though is just that you do need one or two people really thinking about all the domains sort of collectively, and if the prioritization happens across multiple people, it becomes harder to assess and figure out.
Right, makes sense. Okay, I think that if you could share what that you look at some of them on a monthly basis. Is that because there's just less frequency of change? So there'd just be fewer things for you to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's usually as a result of like someone looked at it for a month or two, and on a weekly basis, and we're just seeing a bunch of junk, and we don't want to spend weekly time on that.
Yep.
So, and it's also informed by just like following the news a bit, or if we think that it's sort of less of a politicized, whatever, we're trying to gather this information somehow. But,
That's interesting. I'm curious if anybody else has any thoughts on just how we could potentially better sort through that stuff, because I think there are domains that do just churn out insignificant changes, right? FERC kind of being one of them that I currently cover. It's just there's never been I haven't seen a significant change. So if we could flip that to a monthly check, or add some analytics around, I know that there are bigger picture items about how we can kind of pick up on repeated changes, i.e. the dictionary that we've been keeping. But I'm not sure, Rob or Kev, if you guys have any ideas on where this is going, or how we could better manage that. I should say better identify domains that produce a lot of insignificant changes, and therefore be able to be better at allocating our resources across the monitoring work.
I think part of that is working on some of the really easy heuristics we can have for whether a change is significant or not. And we know a bunch of those. It's just a matter of somebody having the time to do the development work on it. Because it would be sort of the same code to say, when a page comes in and we look at it and we say that's significant or not, and we wind up putting it in the spreadsheet or not, or it's potentially significant or not, as it would be to run through a domain and say this has a whole lot of probably not significant changes compared to other domains. Like that would be largely the same computational code and work. And it's just that somebody needs to have the time to do it, and nobody's had the time to do it for months, and we're just lacking for people with spare hours to work on the code.
Seems like it's sort of did good timing, though, in terms of what Gretchen's trying to work on as well, for us to be sort of honing that a little bit. I mean, I think the question is sort of how, is there a way to sort of even categorize our thinking as we're looking at it as analysts? I mean, so one category that pops up for me is like, I have a whole bunch of sites that are nothing but news feeds. So I check 12 on the analyst sheet every week, right? And I mean, it's what, and of course I'm sort of sideways looking to see if any of these new information is significant from a sort of 20,000 foot level. But in terms of website changes, it's just okay. They've just updated the newsfeed, and I mean, I would be happy to go through, if that's sort of like a thread we want to like get out of there. I mean, that would be something where I'd be happy to go through mine and identify everything that's a news feed. I don't know, that's just a thought. in terms of thinking about an approach.
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely always wondered about those since I'm not actually doing the analyst work, how often people actually, like, why we have those and how often people look at the news items in there as potentially something significant versus just like, this is pointless, it changes every time.
Yeah. I mean, given the fact that that's one, in a group of many diffs we're looking at, sort of, I would say that initially I was looking much more at the substance. And now it's like, okay, it's just updating the news. And, you give a glance at it to see if it's anything revelatory, but most often it's not.
I think related to that, there's some pages that just are news feeds, and then there's other pages that have like a news feed at the bottom or on the side.
Very good
that
point.
causes the same like churn every time. If you want to do the work of like going through your domains and saying these pages are just news feeds, if we could also split out these other pages have news feeds, but they aren't principally news feeds, because if it's just a news feed, we can easily just create like a list of those and just like not put them in the spreadsheets, or like create a separate spreadsheet that has those if we want to like have people easily look at them, but separate them from the main set.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more complicated, but ought not to be too hard thing we can do for the ones that have news feeds on them. It's more work, but it's probably not really hard work for us to be able to find a way to diff those pages, not including the newsfeed part.
Oh, that's interesting.
It'll like the easy way to do it will be a way that's sort of prone to break if they totally redesign the site, because then we won't be able to figure out the same part of the page that is the newsfeed anymore. But for 9 out of 10 cases, it might help.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's great, Rob. Really. So I don't know if there are any other sort of categories like that people can think of.
Well, there's other scrolling item like things like media advisories and just run-of-the-mill reports. Like that's basically what the FERC is, right? They just churn out all of this, all of these rulings type thing. So I've been trying to kind of continually categorize those as scrolling. So honestly, if that category classification of 12 is a great place to start, which I think will capture a bunch of stuff.
Liz, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say there's the other category of things that just cycle through and load differently every time the page loads. So like the front page will come up 3 times in the same sheet. It's like, oh, they changed the picture. Oh, they changed the picture again. Oh, they changed the picture again. Or on globalchange.gov, they love to do these like other reports you may be interested in. And there are 5 of them that it could be total, and I always get some subset of them.
Oh, the trials and tribulations. Totally, yeah.
One time the banner changing on the Bureau of Land Management's website made national news when they changed it to like a sheet of coal. So, I actually don't think that was like the best journalism, but
I mean,
I agree with all the points.
So like from a mathematical perspective, like let's think about this abstractly for a minute. If you have a known set of images that appears on this webpage, I don't know anything about computer science, so let's just issue that disclaimer. But if you have a known set of images, it should be straightforward to say, yes, this is in the set of images, or no, this is not. Is it a sheet of coal? Some human should look at this and find out. But if it is in the set of images, then human has looked at this several dozen times already.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's hard about that is it's hard to identify that something is coming from a set of images. and that set of images is bounded, like whatever the set may be, because all we get is just whatever it happened to be this time or the last time. And so it's hard to abstractly say, oh, it seems like after so many times, this is a repetitive thing. That's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to do across, 30,000 different pages. But if you can specifically identify ones, then we can say on this page, this part of this page, we don't care about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was always sort of something like an option that we knew we could try to pursue. And it takes capacity to set that up. And yeah, I don't think that's like technologically, like we know how to do it. Rob knows how to do it. I mean, and part of the reason for the coding was so that we could aggregate quickly, like all the pages where there are scrolling news. And I'm glad you differentiated the like scrolling news like on the side of the page versus just like here's the page for the news. There's also like the actual news item itself, and that actually is I would say we don't monitor a lot of those because the way our version is, the way we've set up our system is that doesn't like pick up new pages. But we've seen those like press releases get changed, just like an ad hoc way that we've looked at it. And actually, press releases changing is kind of like a sneaky thing that I'm usually suspicious of. We also at the Web Integrity Project we saw that happening with HHS press releases, also them being posted like backdating press releases. That's just kind of a separate issue. And yeah, just removals like a DHS, Department of Homeland Security press release that like removed links later on. So anyway, that's kind of a separate issue. But I think it is generally a question of strategy of like, should we kind of treat news releases as a separate thing, and we rarely like talk about them even when they do come out because we just assume that journalists cover them and things like that. But I would say that probably worth having some people devoted to looking at some of the news feeds, but not necessarily everyone.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but it could be something that's not a weekly. It's not a weekly process. Or yeah, it's really interesting. It's good food for thought. That is an impressive sheet of coal, though. So, that's that is pretty funny. Okay. Well, that's it. That's definitely something on my mind. It's just as I'm looking at this domain, our current domain allocation, how can we get a little bit more strategic with this? Other things that might have, as Marcy mentioned, that might help drive this forward is Gretchen, I think, is doing a lot of work in terms of, looking at our process critically and thinking where we can kind of do less work with insignificant changes. We're also might as well actually move to it now, but we have an update about our hiring of a senior developer. And I don't know, Marcy, do you want to kind of give the update on the hiring front?
Sure. So we're moving forward on the contract for Jason Sherman, whom you guys have met. And very excited about that. And moving into the next phases of contract with Gretchen as well. So those things are moving.
Yeah, we're hoping that we can get those kind of going in the next couple weeks. It's been a long process, but rightfully so for a lot of reasons, but we're really excited. Cool. Next couple things on the agenda from a discussion perspective. Gretchen is obviously atop of a mountain in Idaho, so she couldn't join to talk about the testing of the new classification system. I myself didn't have a chance to test this out this week. Just a new first week in a new seat has been a little challenging time-wise. I don't know if anybody here has anything to add on that. Otherwise, we can table it for next week when she can join. Cool. Good. We've talked about the hiring updates. How about updates from the research side of things and the report writing side of things? I know, has the research team met? I think they missed the meeting the week before last. Anything to update us on, Marcy? Okay. Cool. On the report writing side, we also didn't meet last week. So not much to report. I will say I am still working with the journalist from E&E on the Clean Energy Manufacturing Initiative. I sort of need to regroup probably with Marcy and Toli a little bit on that strategy, because that has cooled from her perspective. The interest in that has cooled from her perspective. So maybe we need to just approach the journalist pool about that instead. Do we have any other? Marcy, go ahead.
I now I'll be able to start focusing on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and with the Endangered Species Act proposal out there, they're intertwined really. And so I would like to get things done in not too distant future on that one. I hope to be able to spend the time needed on it going forward.
That's great. Annie, just for your knowledge, there is a report output update section towards the bottom of the agenda, and these are some of the things that are sort of in the pipeline, moving along through things that we're considering moving into a report writing phase. Sarah, did you have any updates on EPA fracking? We can't hear you, Sarah.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
There you are.
All right. So Justin has had the opportunity to review my latest round of changes or edits and suggestions, and he has feedback for me to review. So I hope to look at that this week and keep things moving forward. I think it's just, with the summertime, people are traveling and out of town, but we're back sort of engaged with that this week.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. Cool. Anything else on the investigation? I wanted Justin Schell, if there's anything from your perspective. I know you had a couple things that you were going to continue to look at. One of them was the BLM renewable energy stuff.
I haven't done anything with that, and then I emailed the guy from EDF about the sage grouse, and I haven't heard anything back. I haven't seen any changes to the sage grouse pages since then, so just sort of a holding pattern.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally.
Could is anyone on here monitoring EPA websites? I'm just curious, with the transition of Pruitt out of EPA, has there been any changes or lack of changes? I mean, I know, Justin, you just presented something.
I think we have been seeing a slowdown, but people are saying that's mostly because it's vacation time. I don't know whether you saw this last summer, those of you who were involved, but the volume hasn't been as high.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if, go ahead, Sarah.
Not this past week, but the week before. So there had been these little sidebars in the compliance, EPA compliance subdomain that have been being removed over time, and they were kind of like they called like fast facts or something like that, and it would be a little factoid about how detrimental something is to the environment. And they've been removed for various pages dealing with toxic waste or air pollution or something. And the one that happened to be removed during the first week of the new interim administrator was one dealing with coal ash. And it was a outdated, it was a statistic from 2010. So perhaps in another context, it would have simply been updated, but it was removed. But it wasn't necessarily isolated because it had been part of this sort of removal over time of these little sidebar bits. But I also have seen a slowdown in the past 2 weeks.
Me too. I did find one edition of the word former Administrator Pruitt on one of their fracking pages.
Yeah, I've seen that as well as changes to outgoing links for the administrator to now the acting administrator.
Should we write a report about that?
Maybe. Yeah, I think you hit the news already. Anything else?
Just so everybody, well, you've seen probably some of the articles about Zinke now that he's lost Pruitt as his cover. Right. So all his shenanigans are coming to the fore.
We'll keep an eye on DOI. Anything else from a reporting perspective?
This is just a question. I don't know. I was wondering what the status of the Department of Transportation fine that Julia identified. It was a substantial part of some climate change website of, I can't remember now, which division of the Department of Transportation.
That's a great point. We brought it up as something that needs to be moved into the reporting pipeline, but frankly, there hasn't been any bandwidth on the team to take on a new report. I think it definitely did deserve a harder look and development of the notes doc that Julia put together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think between the renewable energy stuff at DOI, the Department of Transportation, climate change, and the fracking, the shift in language on the fracking page, those three seemed like really newsworthy contributions that we could make. So looking forward to talking about those at the meeting.
Yep, I totally agree. Hopefully, maybe by next Friday, when the report team comes together again, there'll be some availability, some bandwidth to start moving on some of those. I mean, fracking is just about there or getting there, moving that through. Yeah, and the other two, I might be in a place where I can start picking up one of those two. Did you have something, Marcy? Or?
Oh, no, I don't know if we're there yet, but I was Tolly was going to give us a little bit of a perspective on the Climate Central report. I don't know if that's on the agenda.
Yep, that's there.
Okay.
And then with that, and I wanted to give some time to Rob and Kevin for a dev update. So do you want to jump in totally first? You were going to give us talk about the Climate Central report?
Yeah, and sorry, I was going to do it, I think, a couple weeks ago, but was not able to make the meeting. So as many of you know, last time Edgy had a grant from the Packard Foundation. It was actually given through Climate Central. So Climate Central is actually the the real grantee, and we were kind of sub-granted from that. And half the grant went to Climate Central, half the grant went to EDGI. Climate Central is really in charge of what was originally called the Climate Risk Map. I'm not sure that Climate Risk Map, that phrase made it into this report at all. But the idea was to kind of assess the landscape of what resources related to climate change, and kind of broadly thinking about digital infrastructure are at risk, and how to prioritize efforts of the archiving, monitoring, activist community in general. It was quite an ambitious sort of, the scope for the work was quite ambitious to begin with. It was going to be sort of, I actually think originally much more focused on producing a visual demonstration and some kind of graphic or some kind of central repository that people could access. But over several iterations, and I'm happy to go into details, kind of got refined more and more into, well, we don't even know what the questions are, so let's ask people very open-ended things to try to understand, how do we even ask questions about this? And so essentially what the work became is a series of interviews of experts and employees, government employees, but also ex-employees, and also I think just experts outside of the government, weighing in on what they thought was important and at risk, and then sort of a synthesis of a lot of those results over done by one kind of Climate Central staff and one Climate Central contractor who was actually an ex-EPA employee. And they're both quite good and quite thorough, and I trust their work. But the result, I think it's worth, rather than me summarizing the report, it's worth anyone who's interested just to read about it. That's been shared internally within EDGI, and hopefully, I think, of direct use to the interviewing team, but also useful for the website monitoring folks, for us to know, to basically cross-reference some of these domains that they have listed as a result of their interviews. So they explicitly ask things like, what online resources do you use? They asked everyone what they think is the most important, resource that needs to be saved or focused on. But the result was not a coherent, well-measured answer. Essentially, everyone gave an answer that was the thing that I work on is important. And that's not that surprising. But probably still, if you do that, if you scale that up, then you might distill the things that are most significant. But this was sort of a cursory interviewing of just a preliminary assessment. What they concluded is actually kind of similar to this report that was done by the Center for American Progress, CAP, which I think I circulated a little while back, that looked at budgets and threats to operations as a result of budgets. It's something we've always talked about, but haven't systematically approached, or haven't integrated information from assessing budget cuts to prioritizing monitoring. We've always sort of just done the we're seeing some changes, let's keep monitoring this domain, and done sort of a directed random walk, what I would call.
And that speaks to me because I was a budget analyst for many years too. But and 2018 from a budget standpoint was not devastating, right, to say the least. But looking ahead to 2019, I think it could be very valuable to home in on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, I think this report provides like a great starting point from which to think about these issues, and actually directs us to some like methodologies of how to evaluate shifts in budget and how to kind of extract meaning from that. I believe it's in one of the appendices where that's laid out. So I definitely think if that's something that, you know, we have the capacity to pursue, that we should use this as a resource. Yeah, so here there's Appendix 3, I believe, stages of the annual federal funding process and availability of information on potential threats. That actually kind of walks through, you know, different points, like when does Congress get involved, when does Office of Management and Budget weigh in, what part of that is kind of public and what isn't, and that sets up a kind of an interface for us to sort of say, yeah, what do we use as information for our own decision making? I think so far it's really been the presidential budget, which is really, it makes news quite a bit because they sort of do it with a broad brushstroke and they say ARPA-E, we don't need that anymore, and they put the budget to 0, and then everyone freaks out and says, I can't believe you're doing that. But it really
I have to just tell you that actually has been a historic pattern, because they know that states and local legislators are going to come back and put the money in. So, I mean, it's probably happening much more extreme now, but that pattern is a general one that happens every cycle.
Yeah, and it might actually be like a useful mechanism to get feedback to say, like, this is what we want, and then they kind of get outcry in various dimensions, and then they kind of refine it, and maybe Congress uses that as input. I'm not an expert on any of these things, so mostly don't know what I'm saying, but I think this report will be a useful, if we do think that this is important to delve into, this report will be a useful way to approach these questions. There are a few leads in this report about removals that we didn't know about. I think one of them I talked about. It was about permitting. Now I can't remember what it is, but I brought it up a few weeks ago. And if anyone else finds anything, we can definitely do an assessment. But it actually seems like a lot of the concern that people had was like generated because of the work that we've done.
Mm-hmm.
That's my sense, is like, oh, they are removing things from websites, and it's because Edgy's like revealed it, which is, you know, I think good. I think that's bad that there's not like more robust systems of information monitoring, but good that we're able to contribute. I don't know. I feel like I can go on, but it might just be, if anyone's questions, maybe it's a good time to pause.
No, this is awesome. I mean, we should all kind of probably read this and digest it. And I think just think about how it can be applied to what we do. Is there another set of pages that we need to think about, or domains even? If there are leads, that's definitely like that's a great place to start too.
Thank you, Toli.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll just say quickly that they have a spreadsheet that has like some portals for where data is stored. So that could be useful for the archiving team, although I think it is pretty high level. I don't think it's like really granular. Actually, some of they have multiple spreadsheets. I have one that's pretty high level, one that's a little bit more granular. And I don't know exactly how this is prioritized. I can share. You can take a look at this. I just shared it. No. Yeah, and so the last point I'll make is that this was kind of a subject of discussion a fair amount. This report is not being published publicly, partially because there was a concern that sort of publishing all this research will help anyone who is trying to dismantle climate resources to know where to look and how to approach it, or know about what we're thinking about. I think that I don't know that how significant of a risk that is, but I think that it's worth kind of respecting that and working with partners who we know are aligned in terms of their mission, to sort of figure out action based on this information. I don't think this report has been shared with anyone other than Climate Central and EDGI, but for example, the CAP folks who wrote up the other budget report, those guys I think would be interested in this. And when I was at the event where they presented about their report, I mentioned this and they were really interested. And they actually said themselves that they did a lot of budget analyses that they did not publish publicly for the same exact reason. So anyway, I think that's just a general point that if anyone has ideas of who to share this with, I think it's totally fine as long as we do it under the right conditions with proper buy-in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you so much, Toli. And yeah, I'll definitely give that a read through. I didn't actually skim it and realize just how how in line with what it is that we're currently doing. So it's really helpful. Okay. Anything? You have something else?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Rob, Kev, sorry for this the last couple minutes, but do you have anything from a develop? I know you're just back. Anything to report?
Thanks. Yeah. Quickly. I guess the last time we had a meeting, I just was asking for feedback about Scanner, and then there was the questions about the outgoing links, so I made like a kind of like a quick tutorial fact about it. And other than that, nothing on my end. I will be traveling for the next 3 weeks too, so I'll be kind of quiet in the coming weeks as well.
Still a big fan of the outgoing links view, guys. Much cleaner.
I'm glad. I don't think anything super specific to add on my end other than some more improvements to that view coming down the pipeline. So it should be a little better at identifying things that haven't changed than it is now. And as a quick note, not development related at all, I think Marcy is probably the only person here, but if anybody is in the greater SF Bay area, next week is the Decentralized Web Summit, and there are a few folks who are going to be in town for that, like Brendan from Archivers and Data Together. I think Kevin's going to be in town, and so we're going to get together for drinks or dinner or something sometime next week. So let me know if you want me to add you to that email thread.
When is that happening?
Next week sometime.
Yeah.
Because the summit I think is all week or part of the week. I don't know, but people will generally be in town next week.
Nice.
I'll be in the Bay Area.
Thanks. Yay.
I can, yeah.
You are? You're gonna be out here? Woo.
All right.
Going hiking with the family.
Nice. We still got to get both coasts and whoever's in the middle. I want to shortchange Ann Arbor, but we've got to get together somewhere. I see it happening. All right.
Everybody's invited to come to the Russian River.
That might have to happen.
The redwoods and the coast.
Unless you still have Ann Arbor.
It's really nice there. I love
Ann Arbor wrapping it.
Ann Arbor, I think, still logistically makes sense. All right, cool. Great to see everybody. Have a good rest of the week, and see you in Slack.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
There you go.
Welcome, Annie. Take care.
Nice
Thanks,
meeting you.
guys.